MMA Boxing Talk here. I just wanted to talk about Conor McGregor and what's next for him. There's a lot of speculation going around right now. Of course, like always, Conor McGregor has a lot of options at the moment. A lot of options as to who he can fight next. And of course, nobody makes any decisions for Conor McGregor. He decides, he does what he wants. If he tells the UFC, this is what I'm doing, then there's a good chance that the UFC is just going to go along for the ride. That's how it works when you're a star as big as Conor McGregor, and not only that, but a money making machine. He generates pay per view buys like nobody has ever done in the past. So anyway, I just want to talk about his options. Of course, Tony Ferguson just won the interim title in his division. The purpose of an interim title is when the champion comes back from his hiatus or injury or whatever, that champion, who is Conor McGregor, has to fight Tony Ferguson, the interim champion. Tony Ferguson has also done something that no lightweight in UFC history has ever done, and that's win 10 straight fights at lightweight. Um, and I mean, there's only a handful of guys that have ever went on longer win streaks in the UFC than Tony Ferguson. So he is, he's obviously the rightful guy. Dana White keeps saying it, and I know Dana White always doesn't always doesn't always tell the truth, but this is 3 times in a row where he continues to say he denies the Diaz trilogy, and he says Tony is next. It's the fight that makes sense. It's the fight that has to happen. It happened after the fight at the post-fight press conference of Tony Ferguson versus Kevin Lee. It also happened at the Hockey Hall of Fame when George St. Pierre and Michael Bisping were there doing an press conference. Dana White again said Tony Ferguson is next, and now an interview. He was on a podcast, TSN podcast, which is like the Sports Center in Canada, and he's again saying Tony Ferguson is next, and he's denying the Diaz trilogy talks. So that's good news. But then I also hear, and shout out to Kobe's Corner. He has a great, great MMA channel, one of the best breakdown guys in the game. Definitely go subscribe to his channel. But he made a video earlier today. It's the first video I woke up to. It kind of put me in a bad mood. But that Paulie Malignaggi is, and Conor McGregor is, they're in talks for fighting. So that means Dana White and Al Heyman are sitting down or communicating, trying to work out a fight with Conor McGregor and Paulie Malignaggi. Now, that is cringeworthy. I mean, yeah, I would love to see Conor destroy Paulie Malignaggi, but I would way, 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 way rather see Conor fight in the UFC. Fuck Paulie Malignaggi. If he does that, he's it's all about the money now, and I mean it pretty well already is. But I mean, you just made $100 million. Forget Paulie. In the UFC and Dana White, he's got to be careful because Dana White doesn't want to lose the UFC's credibility. I mean, the UFC for so long was known as the best fighting the best, and it's getting away from that in a lot of the divisions now in the UFC. Especially lightweight, and of course now in middleweight. Um, but the thing is Dana White has to put down, and whatever the company is about the UFC, WIMG, they have to put out the money. They have to give Conor $40-50 million to fight in the UFC, even if it's against Ferguson or Nate Diaz. They have to give him that money to lure him back into the UFC to bring more. He has to do what's right here. Conor is the biggest star in the UFC. He can't continue to box. That would really be detrimental to the UFC as a company as a whole. And I know they can make so much money off that fight against Paulie Malignaggi. There's already a history there. The build-up would be definitely interesting. Paulie is just he's just a moron. He would say whatever he has to say. He already has been doing that. He never shuts up about Conor in the fight. It's been a while since Floyd fought Conor, so I really don't want to see that fight to happen. I would be very, very disappointed. And the sad part is, I would definitely tune in to watch that fight. But I want to see Conor McGregor fight Tony Ferguson. You know, that's the fight that has to happen. So I really hope that Dana White is telling the truth this time. And you know, sometimes he's honest and he's not lying. A lot of times he does lie, but I just hope in this scenario he's not lying and they make Conor versus Tony. I think December 30th is a little soon, but I would love to see it happen then, or maybe in the new year, maybe like February or March. I just want to see that fight happen, and I don't want to see Conor McGregor fight Paulie Malignaggi. I think that would be a huge blow to the UFC, because then, I mean, Conor's going to make a lot of money to fight Paulie. And if that happens, you know, it's just going to be, who knows if Conor will even come back and fight in the UFC at the end of 2018. I mean, this is our biggest star, and I think it'd be wise for the UFC to get him back fighting in the UFC and pay him. It's gonna cost a lot to pay him, but whatever, it doesn't matter who he fights next, whether it's Tony Ferguson or Nate Diaz in the UFC. That pay-per-view is gonna do amazing. That could set the record. I mean, the Nate Diaz trilogy will break the record. Um, but even if Conor fights Tony Ferguson, that fight could very well break the pay-per-view record, because Conor, you know, there's so many UFC fans that just want to see Conor come back. Of course, he gained so much exposure and he gained so much popularity over, you know, the course of this past 6 to 8 months fighting Floyd Mayweather. So make that fight. The UFC is going to get paid. They're not going to have to pay Tony Ferguson a lot of money compared to what they would have to pay Nate Diaz or Paulie Malignaggi. So make that fight, Dana White, and you know, stop dicking around. Bring back the, you know, the legitimacy of the UFC, and bring back the days of the best fighting the best. You know, it's slowly getting away from that, slowly going to the boxing A side versus B side. A side gets to do what they want and can duck a lot of the contenders if they're not a star or have a fan base or are draws. Like, get the fuck out of here with that. The real fans don't give two fucks about that. Tony Ferguson has done more than enough to deserve this shot. And I know this is kind of a rant, but it is what it is, and it's on my mind, and it's pissing me off. I just hope these Paul Malignaggi talks are totally false, totally bullshit. I hope that they go nowhere if they are true. And yeah, Conor versus Tony. Hashtag McGregor versus Ferguson. That's the fight to make. You know, I mean, these talks that it's so funny. It's like, I'm campaigning for Tony Ferguson, the Tony Ferguson fight before the Nate Diaz trilogy. But now that these Paulie Malignaggi talks come about, it's like, holy fuck. If that Paulie Malignaggi fight would actually happen, I'd be begging for the Diaz trilogy. So, I mean, it is what it is. You know, the UFC, if they're smart, you know, they would just make that fight with Tony Ferguson. You won't have to pay him much. Yes, you got to pay Conor a lot, but he's gonna make you guys a shitload in the pay-per-view. And then Nate Diaz, that trilogy will always be there. It'll always be there, and it will always generate money, even if it's a year and a half from now. Even if Conor suffers a loss in the meantime, that trilogy will always be there, because those two guys have a history. It's one of the best rivalries in all of MMA, in the history of MMA. So that fight will always be there. So there's no rush to make that fight. There's none at all. Um, you make the Tony Ferguson fight. You tell Paulie to get the fuck out of here. And if you want to fight Conor, come to MMA. And we know he won't do that. So, Paulie, get the fuck out of here. Nobody likes Paulie Malignaggi. He's just a mouth. He's just a mouthpiece at the end of the day. That's all he is. So anyway, this is a lot longer than I expected. A bit of a rant. But it is the truth. It's what the real fight fans want. So, that's why I had to make this video. That's it for this one. If you like the video, subscribe. Check me out on Twitter at MMA Boxing Talk 1. Peace.